Hey, is this thing on? Alright, so this is Michelle. I was thinking about trying to do a little throwing video for you guys. Um, I'm using the GoPro. It's attached to my forehead, and the thing has been a beast all afternoon. Really upset with it, but seems like we're back now, so I'm going to go ahead and try this. Little disclaimer, I'm doing this video for people who are interested in seeing how pottery is done, but I acknowledge that it's going on YouTube, so people that are potters or beginner potters will probably see it. And all I ask is that if you have feedback on my techniques or what I'm doing, I certainly don't mind any criticism of what I'm doing, anything to improve, perfect. But if you want to be a jerk, and that goes for non-potters too, that goes for anybody. So if you're watching this and your instinct is to comment something that's jerky, just take that somewhere else, because it's not my vibe. Okay, so here we are at the wheel. I've got my discard bucket, which you'll see me using occasionally, and here's my throwing bucket with my little tools. Bunch of sponges. I've got your classic sponge, Mud Tools sponge, Mud Tools blue sponge. Where's my Mud Tools white sponge? There he is. Mud Tools white sponge. Your good old-fashioned wooden knife, and my little fin. Technically this is called a wooden rib, but I like to call it my fin because I do this. Yeah, I'm a dork. Can't help it. Anyway, this is called a bat. It's made of masonite, and we attach it to the wheel here, like so. It's taught to make sure that it's not going to wiggle, because they do warp. And this one is wiggling this way, so I'm going to flip it over and try this way. No wiggle. Good. And then I have to clean it up and wet it. I don't think you have to clean it up, but I do it anyway because I'm a little bit weird. Not weird, just weird. Anyway, okay. So these are balls of clay. This one weighs about 1¼ pounds, 20 ounces. I don't know how many grams because I don't really care about that. And so the first thing you do, obviously, is you try to slam this sucker down right in the middle, and I usually blow it. So we'll see how we do it. See how that's not centered? The important thing is to get the clay to stick to the bat. So a couple of nice aggressive pats should do it. And then we move on to centering, which is probably the most important thing, and it's also one of the hardest things to figure out. So I've been doing this just about 9 months now, and I took a class, and we eventually got a wheel at home, and one of the first things that I needed to figure out was centering, like being able to consistently center. As a beginner, one of the things that I learned that I was doing wrong was that I wasn't really close to the wheel. I was a few inches off, and that screws up your leverage, because what you want to do is get your hands in a nice solid state, which means you're going to squeeze your elbows into your body and rest them on your knees so that they're not going to wiggle around. Then it's just your fingers and your wrists that are going to wiggle. So clay is going to do what you ask it to do. And if it's not doing what you ask it to do, it's because you're not asking it correctly. Kind of mimics what goes on with computers. So again, centering is a really tricky thing, and a lot of potters, you know, acknowledge that, but when you're watching videos online, you'll find that they just seem to be able to, and they're done. I'm going to show you how I do it. Like I said, I'm in this 9 months, and certainly not perfect. I have weak wrists due to previous injuries. What I'm doing is I'm holding the clay here. I'm not really applying much force, but I'm just supporting it. And I'm using this part of my hand to push the clay to the center. And that also brings it up. And then you get this little booty right here. This little booty hole. Get your finger out the booty hole. So then you, and this is where I'm really weak. So, and I just made an air bubble. Awesome. Shit. So what you do is, you're supposed to use your hands and push it down. Down and forward is another maneuver. I try to push it down. Pushing down for me is kind of hard because I end up, like I said, I do have weak wrists. So I do end up pushing it a little off center. But I'm going to do that now. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Alright, and then again, this is new clay that I just pulled out of the bag, so there wasn't really a need for a lot of wedging. But what you're trying to do here is make sure that you're getting out any kind of lumps. If you find an air bubble, try to get that out at this point. And then the most important thing, of course, is getting this clay on center. Man, I am really strong today. I've noticed a tremendous amount of strength I've gained through this exercise. Not sad about that at all. So I'm pushing it down. And this is doing two things. One, it's centering it. And it's also, you know, attaching it to the wheel. So, I've had situations where the wheel was too wet and my clay is going to start scooching all over the place because it's just too wet for sticking to the wheel. I'm going to give it one more cone up. That's what this is called. Coning up. And at this point in the process, a lot of my friends would say, stop right there, Michelle, because you've created something that everybody can use. But I've already made enough onion ring holders. This one I'm going to try to make into a mug. So let's push that baby down again. Oh, see? It's getting a little cattywampus. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm using the heel of my palm here to kind of push that back into center while still pushing her down. So centering is, I like to use feel on it. I can close my eyes and feel if it's centered. And I can also put my hands on it loosely but firmly, I guess, and see if my hands are moving. And they are, a little bit. So this I wouldn't call perfectly centered, but for what we're doing today, let's call it centered. This I'm just dropping it down a little bit. The shape you're going for is this kind of domed shape. And I'm just trying to avoid having it be too tall so that it isn't a lot for the next step. Alright, now here's one thing I really love about pottery. Let's say I've got problems in my life, and I do. Here's one, here's one, here's another one. Let's acknowledge them. Let's keep going. Alright, so we're centered here. Look at my hands. They're not moving. I'm going to open. For this, what I'm trying to do is create a well in the clay that goes almost to the wheel, but not quite. So between 1/4 and 1/2 inch is what I'm going for, and that's what I'm going to do now. And that clay in there is dry, so I'm going to give it a little water. And then the next thing is opening. So because I have weak wrists, I get like, when I'm putting a lot of pressure, my movement is going to be like this. When I'm using a lot of pressure to pull back, my wrist has a tendency to shake. So, and then I get off center, so that sucks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to support the outside and then carefully pull out. And then we get the bottom of our mug. What I've learned through watching tons of videos about this is that you really want to have the mug, or have the bottom be wider than you intended to be in the final state, because it's easier to bring it back than it is to open it further. So when I took the class, I was taught that you're supposed to flatten the bottom and apply pretty solid pressure in the name of compressing the clay. And compressing the clay is supposed to prevent problems that come from the clay drying in an inconsistent way. So this part of the vessel is going to dry faster than this part, and it's going to compress because clay shrinks as it dries, and then it causes cracks in the bottom. And so there's like what I was taught was that you push down on there and it makes a compression and is supposed to prevent that cracking from happening. But what I've learned over the past couple of months is that people who have a lot of experience in clay don't necessarily compress. So my middle ground is to kind of do it half-assed. So I was definitely pushing down there, and I suppose you could say I was compressing it a little bit, but what I was really trying to do is make the bottom flat. And there you go, that bottom is flat. Hey, where'd my problems go? Oh! They dissolved in the mud. Alright, so now I'm going to give myself a little bit of moisture in here, and I'm just squeezing the sponge lightly while I'm touching the side of the pot, the inside of the pot, to give myself that slippery surface so that I don't end up causing a lot of friction while I'm trying to do the next move, which is a pull. May as well just go ahead and compress this top a little bit too. I'm just making sure that that's nice and flat right now so that when I pull it doesn't go all crazy on me. Alright, so wet sponge. This is also an area of, I don't think it's contention, but it's just a matter of personal preference. When I try to pull with my finger, I have a tendency to not have the clay wet enough, and then I get pulls and then it twists and causes all kinds of problems. So I'm not going to do that. I'm using a sponge, and I'm also trying my best to avoid wringing it out completely, because that's just a habit that I've formed over the years before I got into pottery. So now it's it's a little bit wet, but not super wet sponge, and I'm going to go underneath here and grab the clay and pull it up. One thing that I learned as a beginner, when I was first starting out, when I would pull up, all of my clay was going like off to the side here. And what I realized is that I was leaning into it. I was like, oh, I've seen all these videos on how that's supposed to look, and it's supposed to look this way. Well, what's important is how it feels and not how it looks. So if you have your fingers even, your finger in the sponge even, and then you focus your eye on this spot of the clay, you can usually pull straight up to your face, which is what you're trying to do. Another thing that you can do is consciously pull this side higher, I guess, than the inside. So instead of having your fingers perfectly level where the pressure is, you have this one slightly higher, and then you're pulling and you're creating a kind of like a dome. But I'm going to try to do a straight up pull right now. Right. So my eye's right here, and it's going to be pressure where I'm pushing into the clay, and then as I come up, I'm releasing the pressure a little bit. And there you go. That's the first pull. And again, I can easily clean this up. I've got a little lump in here, it looks like. This goober, I'm not that worried about. It's going to come out with my next pull. Right, so let's do this again. This time I'm going to try to grab some of this clay down on the mat, on the bat, and scoop that up, and then apply pressure. Keep my eye on the edge of this pot. Pull her up. So I can tell my rim is cattywampus, and that's okay. I can also tell that I've got a little bit of an inconsistent pulling here because it's wavy, but let's just deal with that. So alright, I'm going to wet the inside again, and again I'm just pouring water down my finger and letting it go down the inside of the pot to moisturize that area. And I'm going to grab it. I'm going to slow down a little bit too, because I don't want to screw this up. I just felt that wave. Oh, shit. Okay, so that happened. And that happens. So, what I'm going to do now is cut that off right there. It's going to result in a smaller pot, but that's okay too. So nice and slow. This is something that I took a long time to learn as well. Nice and slow rotation, needle tool, stick that sucker in there, and then slowly advance it until it's touching your finger on the inside. Boom! So long. Better luck next time. Alright. It's not cheating. It's adapting. So now, as you know, as you can imagine, we're probably going to end up with a much smaller pot, but that's okay. I'm going to compress the rim again. Make sure it's nice and smooth. And then let's bring some of this clay up from the bottom. Make this thing tall again, huh? Here it comes. I don't know how tall I'm going to be able to get this thing now. I'm sure I lost probably a third of its weight, but I'm not trying to make a masterpiece here. I'm just trying to do a demonstration. So I'm going to give it another shot, try to bring up more clay. There it is. It's a nice thin pot. Now, that's a little cattywampus. But height-wise, looks pretty good. All right. Next move is taking the knife and trimming the skirt, removing that excess clay. And because I always seem to have too much clay there, this is something I do. I'm sure this will get criticism, but I do it and I haven't had any problem with it since. Watch this. I think that's going to make the bottom a little bit inconsistent and it's round, but let's see if I can fix it up. Whoosh. Yep. Ta-da! Alright. So, next move is to take the old metal rib, clean up the outside a little bit. What I'm trying to do here is remove the extra wet clay that's on the outside. And it's not an absolute must, but it's nice to do. It doesn't really take off much, but there it is. Alright. Now I'm going to collar a little bit. Again, everybody's taught like this, right? Something like this, 3 points, 6 points, whatever. I do it like this. Now it's not as wide as it was. Okay. Now I'm going to give this thing a little bit of shape. So wet hands again, make sure we're not causing any friction with dry hands on the inside of the clay. And I'm going to apply really slight pressure to the inside, which is going to cause the outside to belly. You want to do this slowly. If you're not happy with your belly, do it a few times. That's pretty good, doesn't it? I think so. Maybe a little more. Oh, that's a nice belly. Look at the belly. Very good belly. Okay. Finally, I'm going to be thinking about your precious little lips. So what I'm trying to do here is make sure that the place where you would place your lips is non-offensive in any way. So it's not going to be sharp, it's not going to have lines in it, it's going to be nice and smooth. So I take this finishing sponge and I just go ahead and go like so. Ooh, that's going to be nice on your lips. That's good. And then I'm just going to clean up the inside a little bit. I haven't really used a rib on the inside so much. And people do it, but I just haven't really spent much time on that yet. And then finally, there's a ton of water in the bottom here. So I'm going to use my sponge on a stick. Suck it up. Come on, suck it up. See that little wave right there? Sponge is too wet. Suck it up. Yeah, that's good. Okay, that's nice and dry, or dry enough. Good. Right. Then I have this tool, which is it's used for painting dots on, you know, you use paint and then you make dots, and I have a bunch of different sizes. I use this for making my swirl on the inside, and it goes like this. Sometimes it goes up. There. Nice and swirly. Alright, now the last thing I want to do is prepare this thing for coming off the bat. And to do that, there's a couple of things involved. First, I'm going to clean this because having a really super wet bat, especially when you're using masonite, is no bueno because it'll warp. And I'm also cleaning the outer edge because the slip makes it slippery. Imagine that. And I won't be able to grab it. So that's done. Then I'm going to use my knife tool to create a little indentation there at the bottom. And maybe I'll even just clean it up a little bit. Clean up that excess. Nice. Now I was taught that that's to help the wire go through, but that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. I'm just gonna, oh snap, look, I touched it. Son of a muppet. Okay, hold on, I can fix that. Come here, you little soft sponge. Alright, watch. Whee! Ooh, that's so soft for your lips. Okay, so long. Alright, so the last thing I want to do is use, oh, son of a bitch. Alright, let me fix this one last time and then I'll stop being so clumsy. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold this firmly, nice and taut, and then I'm also going to be applying pressure to try and get it as close to the bat as possible. And one of my favorite parts is watching the inside of the pot, because you can tell if the bottom's too thin. You'll definitely be able to see the wire go through there, but depending on how it looks is how thin the bottom of your pot is. Let's do it. That looks pretty good. And then finally, finally, I'm gonna pull this sucker off the wheel and show it to Sonny. What do you think, buddy? Looks pretty good. Do you like that one? Yeah. Okay. It's a little baby boy because I lost all that clay because I screwed it up. But we're going to stick it over here and then wait for the next step, which I'm not going to show you today. Anyway, that is Michelle throwing a pot. Hope you enjoyed it. Adios.